All right, well, I want to welcome everybody here today to the intro to StraboSpot 2. We're going to have 4 days of webinars here, a couple hours at noontime, more or less, or a little earlier on the West Coast to introduce what's new with Strabo2, using it. We'll have some general Strabo background for people as well. That'll be the first part of today. And we'll be going on with different subjects every day, trying to highlight some of the things that you can do, new things. And then for those of you who have used Strabo 1, we'll be talking about how to do the things you used to do in the new format. I want to start out by just getting all of the organizers and the Strabo team that's together for this to do introductions. So Basil.
Hello, I'm Basil Tikoff. Happily, you won't hear a whole lot from me this week because we have a lot of other people doing great presentations. But I wanted to thank you all for coming and welcome.
Alex.
Hey there, I'm Alex Lusk. I'm a postdoc at UW-Madison.
Nick. You're muted, Nick.
Hey, I'm Nick. Nick Roberts. I'm a postdoc at UW-Madison as well.
Julie Newman.
Hi, I'm at Texas A&M University.
And Noah Phillips.
Hi, I'm Noah. I'm a postdoc at Texas A&M University.
And I'm Doug Walker at University of Kansas. I haven't forgotten anybody, have I? That would be embarrassing.
No, I think we got most of the StraboSpot team.
And then there'll be a couple more people coming on over the course of the next few days. And then on Thursday afternoon, towards the end of the day, after you've gotten a chance to use Strabo 2 a bit, we'll have the StraboSpot developers come on. We've got 4 developers who are working on this, and they'll come on for an appearance and to answer any questions about development, anything else you want to ask them. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to do a little bit of background to StraboSpot and how we got to Strabo 2, and just kind of make sure we're all more or less on the same page. Is everybody seeing something that says StraboSpot, Strabo 2, and Strabo ecosystem?
Yes, we are.
All right, well, that's all the introduction it needs. So basically, we're working with StraboSpot. StraboSpot started a while back, and the idea behind StraboSpot and the reason spot is in there is that we have this idea of a spot, and on this slide you can see the little red circles in here. Hopefully my red pointer shows up. And basically a spot is an area of interest or an area where you collect data and that data applies to it. So this is an example from the Klamath Mountains where there was a study of finite strain in rheology. So that was what this whole map area was all about, 100 meters or more on a side. And within that, there were smaller areas such as this diagram on the right-hand side where more data were collected so that you could do rheology and finite strains. For example, in this area, this folded dike has various measurements on it. And again, those are divided into subspots. Sorry, not subspots. Those are divided into smaller spots within this larger spot. And then within any spot, you can have even smaller spots, for example, with this cross-polar view here. And then that can relate to smaller yet spots within it. What StraboSpot does is it records this whole nesting hierarchy and spatial relation. The StraboSpot system, if you're used to GISs, is sort of like a GIS without an intended scale of use. Basically, any scale is fine, and we just seamlessly go from there. So this is an example of a map in Australia, field site. You can collect samples, take samples, do thin section billets, and then go into any sort of data collection that you want with that. Again, the spanning of these different scales is meant to be completely seamless to the user. We'll have a demo of a couple things with that, something we call nesting a little bit later. StraboSpot is based on working with field geologists and more lab geologists, and trying to fit their workflow into a system that they can use. So rather than starting out with something like a GIS and then building things to make it work, we kind of took the other approach of figuring out what to do and make it work in the field. So we started with this idea of spot where we measure things. So you can see in the lower left, this fold where there's some layering attitudes and a fold axis. What a geologist would normally do would be collect 3 measurements more here to put data in. And what we've done is implemented this in a graph data system. And basically what that allows us to do is establish relationships between various observations. And so, for example, this is the same layer where the measurement is made. We can capture that sort of information. So the attributes, the unit measurements then are all connected by relationships, nodes and edges for those of you who know how graph systems work. But the other thing that we put in here is this idea of tag and logical organization. So for example, we can say, okay, I can keep all of these measurements together by relating them to a tag, which is just like a sticky note that says just this is fold 1 that I'm measuring. So if you're collecting data on a number of folds, you could keep all of those organized separately without any sort of issue at all. So you could imagine this diagram lower left with 8 sticky notes on it. And in fact, if you wanted to, you could say, okay, those are all the same structure. That's what their relationship is. But then you could say, oh, and by the way, all of these are in the same quartzite unit, for example. So with tags and these sticky note type things, you can add as many of these as you want. And it's a very flexible part of the system. It's becoming part of the display system that you'll see a little bit later. Just a little bit of background and how we got to where we are. StraboSpot started in 2014 after a field RCN that was led by Matty Mukherjee and others. And basically the initial design requirements 7 years ago were that it should function on a phone. It should have a screen that is readable at that size. It should run on iOS and Android both. And for that reason, we went with a technology between Apache Cordova and Ionic. And it needed to basically interact with all the device, all the parts of the camera and the mobile device, including camera, GPS, accelerometer. And we started the field testing in January of 2015 with this. And what came out of this is, for those of you who have used it, a Strabo 1 version. This is Strabo 1. We're not going to spend much time on it. But basically, we had an organization shown on a tablet here, but that would work on a phone, where you could collect data, put measurements in or contacts in. And then we had a lot of output and input options from shapefile to shapefile. This is just pulling those data out and taking them into Google Earth. And then taking a look at this in some other package. We also have developed other modules that have gone on this. We got a second round of funding where we were bringing in petrology, metamorphic igneous petrology, and sedimentology. At this point, Strabo SED is being moved into Strabo2, but for right now, if that's your main thing, you're using, it's still in Strabo 1. We'll hear a discussion about that later. The good thing is that you can go seamlessly between Strabo 1 and Strabo 2. And we've kept that going. The whole back end was developed on a vocabulary or a lexicon of terms that we organized by getting together community workshops and trying to figure out how people describe things. So the whole back end geometry, vocabulary of Strabo has been community vetted over the years. And we've had a lot of different people involved with this. And there's a search functionality we'll see a little bit later that can bring you into finding data from other people. Right now we have data worldwide. Along with this, we've developed a couple other tools. This is something called Stravo Tools that Alan Glazner has worked a lot on. It basically will take your picture of a rock on the upper right and attempt to do mode, fabric, and color index on it as well. And so this is an ancillary program you can use with it. Of course, you can use it for other purposes like classifying your horse or cat or making edge drawings of cats, however you want to test it. But all of that together is putting in what we're calling the StraboSpot ecosystem at this point. So a field component that we'll be talking about today and this week with StraboSpot, Strabo Tools. We'll hear about a micro component later on in the week where you can organize thin sections or any scale of imagery actually. And then what's in the works, and we'll hear a little bit about this, is linking in experimental data for rock deformation at some point. So this is kind of the ecosystem of where we are now. So trying to bridge across all these gaps. And of course, you can do all the management of your data at the StraboSpot website. You manage data sets and projects, upload, convert data, et cetera, at this spot. So it's kind of your home. StraboSpot is built to follow fair data principles, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. We're really striving at that. And we consider Strabo to be fair, and search interface and download allow you to get what you want. Data is served in both GeoJSON and GIS, a lot of different formats, and we're trying to support full metadata and attribution in ways that are really impossible by other means. Every bit of data is attributed to somebody. So Strabo 2 got its motivation and kickoff at a petrology workshop that was held in 2018. That was the first test of the petrology module. Here are some of the participants. This was organized by Alan Glazner and Basil Tikoff here. Blair Shaney is one of the StraboSpot PIs, and then a lot of other users came in and were testing things. And so what we did in 2018 is we did a pretty good review of how people use StraboSpot, and our review showed that over 90% of the app installs were on iOS, and they weren't on Android. And almost all installs were not on phones, they were on tablets. And when we surveyed users, they basically said we need a better map display, integration of things with the device as far as the compass and the camera, and looking at more performance and visualization. And for that reason, we've gone to a slightly different programming structure where we're developing with something called React Native, which is how we make all the interfaces. We can actually interface with Swift, which is the native programming language for iOS, which gives us complete access to the device. And then we keep everything straight using something called Redux, which helps bind the entire package together. Just a little bit of background with that. So this is the Strabo 2 interface, and we'll be seeing a lot more of it today. But where we're coming at with this is just a view that's not tuned so that it shows up okay on a phone. It shows up fine on tablets. It has a little bit different menuing structure. We've introduced this thing called a notebook, so you can still see the map while seeing your data. And again, because we've gone to this programming environment, we have much closer integration of things like the compass in the system. We're striving to get this to work as well as the compass does in StereoNet mobile, which really is kind of a fantastic program. You'll hear more about that later too, Rick Allmendinger's program. But the idea here is that you can come in, see, visualize, and plot your data at the same time. The colors on here are colored based on tags, and we'll hear more about that later as well. But the compass comes in well. You visualize spots as you're taking the measurements. You can measure data and then classify it easily. You have a bunch of tools. These are similar to the tabs that you had on Strabo 1 for tags, compass, samples, notes, taking photos and drawing figures, making sketches. The sketch functioning has gone up a little bit with this, but overall, we've kept this 100% compatible with Strabo 1. Again, you'll see that just a little bit. This again is the sketching that we put in. Strabo 1, you were sketching by basically adding data to images. Now you can take a picture, get different paint brushes, excuse me, different colors, and it basically creates new sketches for you while preserving your old images or the images that you bring in. So that's where we've gone from and why we've gotten to Strabo 2. Thanks for coming here. It is available at the App Store right now. So you can get Strabo 2 version 1.01 now at the App Store if you want. All right. So does anybody, I guess we'll stop here for just a second and see if anybody has any questions.
Doug, perhaps we can make an announcement that there will be, if anybody needs help this afternoon, just getting started with StraboSpot 2 or downloading it or whatever, that people will be on. Alex, do you want to say anything about that, or other than just its timing?
No, we'll provide some more details at the end of the seminar today.
Right. I just want, if people had to get off, I just wanted to make sure they know. So it's from, I believe 2 to 4 Central Time. Is that right?
Yep, and I'll send out a Zoom link via email.
Right.
Hopefully you've been able to install Strabo 2 without too much of an issue. One thing that's been coming up is that we've had people experience a little bit of issues if they have an older version or test flight version of Strabo 2 on their device. We recommend uninstalling older versions when you install Strabo 2. The update should install okay over the top of that, but just for the first switch, it would be a good idea to do that. And again, you can upload data to the server. It's all preserved the same way it was with Strabo 1, and you can bring it back and forth pretty easily. All right.
And just to clarify,
yeah.
Just to clarify that, you don't need to delete Strabo 1.
No.
Strabo 1 and Strabo 2 are separate applications, so you can have both of them on your iPad at the same time. So we're just talking about if you had an earlier beta version of Strabo 2, you should delete the app before downloading the official App Store version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick. Other questions or things that I forgot? So many things I forgot.
There's a question in the chat.
Export a single element from one project to another, one field sketch. You can certainly export field sketches without a problem through pictures. For one spot, basically, we're still not having spots being transferred from one project to another. Data sets you can manage and move on the website on your account. Extract data only through the apps now. No, right now we're still, you have to go to the web version to extract data. Okay, thank you. So Strabo2 for Android, I'm just going to say it's coming. The nice thing about the React Native environment is it's a cross-platform development environment, and the pages perform fine. The difference is that we have these modules that really read into the iOS system to pull out measurements. And Androids are not all made the same in that regard. So over the summer, we'll be testing and trying to get an Android version out if we can. But again, we went to the iOS route basically because that's where most of our community was and what they were doing. Okay, well, I think we'll go to our next presentation, which is upcoming developments with Julie Newman.
Hey, everybody. So Doug already touched on the StraboSpot ecosystem a little bit, so I'm just going to say a little bit more about it. So as Doug, let you know, StraboSpot 2, or the field app for Strabo, our goal is for it to be linked, for the database to be linked with data from Strabo Micro and Strabo Experimental.
Julie, just for a second, let me interrupt. I can only see half your screen. Can others see more of her screen than that?
Oh, no.
No, it's the same.
There we
Sorry.
go. That's fine.
I have a bad habit of doing that. Sorry. How's that?
That works well. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. I think I'd learn. I do that all the time. Okay, so so Strabo Micro is the app for images. So could be any images, but we're focused on images at microscale images from thin sections. So images that you take with an optical microscope or an SEM or a TM or microprobe or something like that. And the idea is that these images are tied to the field context from which they come. Because clearly we need to know where these images are from, and we want the context, what's the field environment that they're from. So Strabo Micro allows you to link your image data with the field context. We're also working on developing Strabo Experimental, and this will allow images from experimentally deformed rocks to be tied into the experimental context from which they came. And also experimental work often will deform naturally deformed rocks. It can also be tied to the field context that it's coming from. So a little bit more about Strabo Micro. So Strabo Micro, we have it available for testing now, for beta testing, and that's available at the StraboSpot.org website. Right now, it's basically an image management system. So you have the ability to upload images and the metadata about that image. So is it an image from an optical microscope or an SEM, information about that instrument. It'll be tied to the field or experimental. Experimental is coming, but it'll be tied right now to the field context, including orientation and scale. Scale can be tracked between images. So you can nest in images if you have a higher resolution image that you've taken from an area within an image. It will track the scale between those two images in addition to tracking the nesting. Right now, there's the ability to put in basic data descriptions of the mineralogy, a little bit about the grain size and fabric. And you can also link your image or any spot within the image to associated data. So if you have SEM data, EDS data, or ABSD data from a sample, you can link it to a spot or to the whole image. So all of that is available right now for testing. What we're working on for the future is the ability to add further description to put into the database about deformation microstructures. So we've had the community working on vocabulary and workflow for deformation microstructures for some time. And we are beginning to work with the sedimentary petrology and igneous and metamorphic petrology communities to start developing vocabulary and workflow for those communities so that, any type of rock image would be able to be described in this app and tied to the field or experimental context. Strabo Experimental is also in process. And the goal is an online interface that will allow input of data, searching and downloading of experimental data from different labs. And then the further goal is to be able to plot experimental data from multiple sources. So if you want to look at feldspar data that was accumulated in different labs around the world, you could put it together. So as a new tool for new kinds of research. So that's the StraboSpot ecosystem. This is where we're hoping to go, to have these different apps all work together with the data going into one shared database. Thanks, and that's all I have for this. Any questions? And Noah will be giving, later in the week, Noah will be giving a demo of Strabo Micro. So you can look for that.
All right. Well, thank you, Julie. Yeah, the idea is here is that you should be able to go from a field sample to a micro image pretty much seamlessly once everything is kicked in and working well. Or if you're in micro, you should be able to instantly go to your field context map and other information field photos. Okay, if no questions for any of that, our next speaker will be Nick Roberts talking about what's new in Strabo 2. You're still muted, Nick.
There we go. For some reason, my space bar doesn't work to unmute. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit, picking up where Doug left off in his intro, about what we've worked on to create this new app, StraboSpot 2, and I'll show you and kind of give you a quick guide through the new user interface. Just to kind of summarize the development timeline, as Doug mentioned, we started in 2018 getting kind of accumulating feedback from the first version of the app. And from that, we kind of knew that we needed to do a few things. And one of those things was a code-based rewrite. So this flowchart has what things that the programmers did at the top, the design team in the middle, and then outreach to the community and feedback from the community on the bottom. So in 2018, 2019, we did initial designs and storyboards of the new StraboSpot 2. And as part of that, we ran a AGU workshop. And then throughout the design process, we've continued to do field testing and workshops. We did a few virtual workshops over the summer last year that we presented some of the initial designs. And then over the first half of this year, we've been doing a public beta testing, and we ran a workshop back in, I think it was March, to preview that and we've been getting some feedback through that beta testing period. So we've released to the App Store a version of StraboSpot 2 that has kind of the core functionality, and we are. But as Doug mentioned, there's still more to come. So over the summer, we're going to be building out some of the data entry pages, including the IGMET lithology pages, we're going to start the process of implementing the said strat mode and a few other vocabulary pages such as fabric. So there's still more to come in StraboSpot 2, but we've released an app so that people can use it this summer that has some of that core functionality. So basically, our main goal is to have an app that has a streamlined design for efficient and intuitive data collection in the field. So some key things that are new is that there's the map is always visible and it's fully interactive, even if other things are partially in front of it. We have a notebook view for spot data entry, which allows you to kind of see all of the data that's summarized that you've collected at a spot. And then we've created data entry tools that reduce the interactions that you have to have with long data forms as you're inputting data. So it's much more kind of touch and more intuitively inputting data. And then we have more map customization, including being able to color points and polygons by rock unit or concepts. And that's done using color coding tags. So here's just a kind of diagram summarizing when you open up the app after you log in to your StraboSpot account, this is what you see. So on the left-hand side, there are tools that are the settings, maps, and attributes, and then 3 buttons that control the map visualization and some map actions. The ability to kind of show your current location. And then on the right-hand side, you can open your notebook where you've accumulated data, shows your internet connectivity status. And then here, this is at the lower right, the core of data input is creating point, line, and polygon spots. A kind of slightly hidden feature that we'll come back to a few times is that you can toggle whether lines and polygons are straight edged lines that you tap on the screen, each vertex, versus freehand drawn lines on the screen. So if you go into the settings and preferences, which is this little house icon in the upper left of the screen, that's where you can manage your StraboSpot account and active project. You can also, under attributes, look at all of the spots, images, samples, or tags within your project. So it gives you a kind of bird's eye view of what kind of data you've collected. Under maps, you can manage custom maps, image-based maps, and this is also where you can manage the map tiles that you've stored offline. And finally, there's some preferences. The most important one is the ability to set your naming conventions for spots and samples, so it automatically names it how you want. And then the big difference with Strabo 2 is the way that we display data. So we have something called the notebook view. It pops in on the right-hand side of the screen, and the notebook overview allows you to just summarize all of the data that you have. And then along the bottom are data entry tools. So from the overview, you can tap on any of these data entries to edit them, or you can go into the tools to add new data. So I'll just give an example of what these data entry tools look like. So we call them quick entry windows because they are not all of the data that you can input, but they're kind of the first order types of data that you would want. So for measurement, there are lots and lots of detailed things that you can add about measurements, but most of the time, what you want to say is, are you measuring something planar or linear? What's the quality of your measurement? And what's the measurement? So to take a measurement, you just tap on this compass, and it's a live updating animated compass, so it shows you the real orientation of the iPad. And you can either take a bunch of measurements and then bulk identify them. So you can say all of these measurements were bedding, for example, or you can use this use measurement type template. If you toggle that on, and I'll show that in a sec, you can actually predefine what kind of thing you're measuring so that all of your measurements have that. And here's another example of one of these quick entry windows. So you can name the sample. You can say whether it's in place or float, whether it's oriented or unoriented, and put some notes in. And tags work much the same way. You can create a new tag right in the field, or you can create a bunch of tags before you go out into the field, and you can just check as many tags as you want that apply to that spot. So I'm just going to, that was a kind of a quick overview of what's new in Strabo 2. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'll share my iPad screen. Just bear with me 1 second. All right. Is my iPad screen showing?
Looking good.
Okay, great. So here is StraboSpot 2. It should look very familiar from the screenshots that I just showed you. And I just want to go through the process of adding a spot and adding some data quickly, just to show you how that works. So down the lower right corner, there are these 3 buttons. And right now, point, line, and polygon, I'll click on line just to show you. If I hold down, it actually switches to that button is now a freehand draw line. And if I hold down again, now it's back to a drop vertices to draw kind of straight edged segments. If I want to add a spot, I'm in Madison right now, and this field area is in Arizona. So I just want to be able to click on the point spot and then add a point to the map. And when you do that, the notebook slides in from the right. There's no data in it, obviously, right now. But if I want to add a measurement, it's as simple as clicking the measurement tool. And now you can see as I rotate my iPad around that the strike and dip symbol updates. I can collect a planar feature, but just by tapping on the compass. I can do that as many times as I want if I want to get a lot of measurements. I can also add simultaneous planar and linear features. So this is good if I'm measuring a foliation and lineation at the same time. The lineation direction is parallel to the long edge of your iPad. So you just line up the long edge of your iPad to the lineation, the flat surface of the iPad to the foliation, and then you can click and simultaneously measure a planar and linear measurement, or you can just do a linear measurement. So here I've collected several planar measurements. They are completely uncategorized. It just says planar feature. If I want to identify all of them, I click right here to identify all. And then it brings me into a form where I can say, well, all these features were bedding, and the bedding was characterized by a lithologic change. And I can put more detail if I want, and I hit save. And now all of those are categorized as bedding a lithologic change. So that's one way to categorize measurements as you go. Another way is by using these measurement templates. So you can create a new measurement template, and it gives that same form. And I can say, well, I'm about to measure a bunch of foliation, and that is a schistosity. Hit save. Oh, I have to put a name. And now every planar measurement that I do is going to have that. And so I can, before I go out in the field, if I know the kinds of things I'm going to measure, I can just pre-populate that. And then when I hit change, there will be a bunch of options down here. And I can just predefine if I like that workflow better. Maybe I'll pause there and see. I haven't not been looking at the chat, but if there are any questions, we can kind of address those.
I've been answering questions a bit as they come up, but if anybody has questions for Nick, go for it.
I'll ask Nick a question. How is magnetic declination handled?
Sure, that's a really good question, actually. So we use the short answer is declination is handled automatically. Apple, because it knows your GPS location and it knows the magnetic compass, they actually the compass readout that we get corrects for the magnetic declination. So we use the true north in these measurements. So that's the short answer. It's handled automatically. You can, by the way, I didn't show this, you can input measurements completely manually. So if you are more comfortable using a button, or for whatever reason you found that your device doesn't give accurate measurements, maybe because there's magnetic rocks nearby, I guess a Brunton wouldn't work for that either. But some people prefer to use a Brunton still. So you can manually input the strike and dip or trend and plunge.
To answer Terry's question, we don't have any information, I think, about the quality of the L measurements that I know of. We haven't done that rigorously.
We pretty much just follow the stuff that Rick Allmendinger's published on his tests of the compass in iOS devices.
Yeah. Okay, so Kurt asked a good question. Is it possible to tie a photo of the sample in situ to the record of that sample? And the answer is yes. It is done by making a photo an image-based map, and then you can place the sample on the photo. I can either quickly show that, or I can't remember whether we're going to be showing that later. If one of the other Strabo members has some input on that.
We've got time. You can go ahead and show it.
Okay, I'll show that. Okay, so I'll actually I'm gonna go to the image gallery here. This shows all of the images within this project. And so I will go to an image that I think maybe it would be nice to have two samples from. So I'll go to the spot that has this image in it. So I'll click View in Spot. So any image you can here toggle on as an image base map. So I will toggle that on. And if I view it as a base map, it pops up in the map pane, replacing the actual geographic map. And now I still have my point line and polygon tools. If I want to sample this quartz vein and the rock around it, I would place a spot there on the quartz vein, and I could just add a sample. I'll save that sample, and then I could add a spot to the rock and add a sample to that. So now I have spots, each with a sample, but it shows you exactly where on the photo that I took those samples.
Nick, can you show them on the map how when you add a spot, it tells you which data set you're adding to?
Sure, yep.
So one of the questions was having trouble adding a spot. You have to make sure the data set, you have at least one data set active. And then you'll see how it tells you which data set you're using.
Yeah, so that's right. So I'll just show how to make the data sets active and to choose which data sets first. So if you go to the settings and preferences and you go to active project, then you get the project data sets at the top. So this project has 3 data sets. And then under that, it says active data sets. And you have to tap one of these. And the active data set is the data set to which new data is added. So you can change that at any time. But when you add data, so if I were to add a point, a little window in the bottom right pops up and it says selected data set. So that's the data set that you're about to add a spot to. And the same thing happens if you're adding a line or a polygon. It'll tell you which data set you're adding spots to. So if for some reason, when you load a project, none of the data sets are activated, that might be the problem that people are running into. Yeah, you just go to your active project and toggle them on.
Nick, there's a question from Liz. What are data sets? Just subsets in a project? Question mark.
That's great. Yes, data sets are a way for you to organize your data within a project. There are, and I'll talk a little bit about this, I think tomorrow morning, but there are, it's completely freeform. Some people, the way I have used data sets is actually by separating out the different field seasons. So I have a 2016, 2017, 2018 in my, this is more of an example project, but in my project, I have those field seasons as different data sets so I can keep them separate. Another way you could use data sets is, let's say that you have kind of 3 main sub areas in your field area and you kind of want to keep those distinct from each other, then you would create a data set for each of those. That's a good question. So it's completely flexible how you want to use them. Some people will just have one data set for everything in a project because they don't feel the need to subset that data.
Nick, one other thing on data sets is if you're working with somebody else, you can work on the same project, but you can work on separate data sets. And that way you can keep all your data separated that way too.
Yeah, so I'll talk about this a little bit when I talk later today about uploading and making backups of your projects. But data sets are backed up. You can back up them kind of individually. So if you upload to Strabo, it will only upload, it will only replace the things on the server. It will only replace the data sets on the server that are toggled on your device when you do that upload. So that makes it a really convenient way if you have multiple iPads all logged into the same account, all working on the same project. They can work on 3 different data sets and then upload just those data sets and it'll all be there on the server.
We had a question about copying spots from one project to another. Do you want to take that or should I take that?
Sure. Yeah, we don't currently have the ability to copy individual spots, but you can move data sets from one project to another on the StraboSpot.org on the web interface.
Are there any more questions for Nick at this point? Nick, do you want to, we've still got 3 or 4 minutes. Do you want to demo anything else here with the interface since you're
Sure. Yep. So another thing, and that we'll talk about a little bit later, is that just showing how these map symbology layers work. So you can choose different map layers. It's pretty responsive. I've also created a custom base map, and we'll show you how to do that at a later point during this workshop. But So you can create, this is just a geotiff that I created on QGIS, and I can input it into Strabo, no problem. And we have all of the same kind of map actions that Strabo 1 had. So you can actually lasso all of your measurements. So lasso some spots, and it'll copy the measurements to the clipboard, and you can go to Allmendinger's StereoNet program on your iPad and plot those up by just copying them in. Another key feature of the interface here is that Strabo 1 did not have is a kind of a way to see all of the spots that you've created. And you can view them in reverse chronological order. So that's just like the most recent spots are at the top. Or you can view them by just the spots that are within the iPad's map extent. So I'm pretty zoomed out right now, so it shows a lot of spots. But if I zoom in, you'll see that it will only show the spots that are inside of that screen. And it also has little icons that show what kind of data are in that spot. So that's a really nice way for you to kind of peruse your data. And the same thing goes for images. So if you're looking at the images just in the map extent, it's a good way to filter through, if you have a really big project, where images are on the map.
So Nick, some of those are colored and some aren't. Could you just show us how you color one
Sure.
of those dips?
Yep. So we color things by tags. So if I select this spot right here, and I open it in the notebook, you can see that has no tags. So I can add a tag to it. I'll create a new tag, just says test. And I'll say that it is a concept. And it's a geologic structure. And I'll say, I want to tag everything that's a fold. So now I have this test tag, and it's not colored yet on the map, but if I tap that tag, it opens up in the settings and preferences where to edit the tags. And here in the top right, you can see tag color. So I can then go and say, I want the test tag to appear as that color. So it's still not colored. And that's because in the symbology, I want to tap on show tag color, and I want to color the map based on conceptual tags. So now, perhaps it's a little hard to see, but there's a dot behind the tag, or behind the spot that's colored. So you can color the map based on either conceptual tags or geologic unit tags. So that way you can go and you can if you're mapping, you can say the geologic unit, but you might also want to sometimes view the map based on some kind of conceptual tag that you've been keeping track of as well. So you can just toggle between those.
Go ahead and show what happens with unit labels there too. That's pretty cool. Symbol labels, I mean.
Oh yeah, yeah. So for measurements, or for if you've put a label on the spot, you can choose whether or not to view the spot labels. I have a lot of measurements here, so unfortunately, this is not the best example because they kind of print over each other. But in spots where you only have one measurement, you'll see that. So you can toggle that on and off. Are there any other things that I should that people want to see?
Okay. Thank you, Nick. We have a break scheduled for right now till for 20 minutes. We'll go ahead and take that, but we will all stay on. And if you have any other questions or want anything else shown, just go ahead and ask. Otherwise, we will resume again at 15 past the hour. And at that point, we're going to figure out how to go from Strabo 1 to Strabo 2 and vice versa. We have the question, it looks like the dip showed up, but not the plunge. Is there a way to label both?
That was on Nick's last map, when you hit the labels.
Yeah, let me check that.
And my other question was a little more general. You can have a tag on one, you can have both a geologic unit tag and a concept tab on one spot and choose how you show them on the map.
That's
Yep.
exactly right.
Cool.
Yeah, so to get at your first question, it does look like the plunges are not labeled, but that is something that we can easily fix. Yep, that was a good catch. So actually, you can have as many tags as you want.
Okay.
So you could have multiple geologic unit tags. It's not a common use case that you would do that. It will show, the color will reflect the first tag that you do. So if you have 3 geologic unit tags, it'll show the first one. And if you have multiple conceptual tags, again, it will show the first one you entered.
Okay, thanks. So I was trying to, I didn't know about that. You can put a spot, like when you hold down on the spot, and then you can put a spot wherever you want. How do you get that to work? Because I'm trying it and I can't get it to work.
Yep. So if you long press on the spot and then let go, the tool toggles to a different tool. So
I
then
saw
you tap
that.
on it. Yep.
Then you just tap where you want the spot to be.
So when you have done the long press, you haven't selected the tool yet. You've just changed what it is. So then you have to tap on the tool like a quick tap.
Okay.
And then once it's blue, then you tap on the screen.
Okay, thanks. I missed that part.
Yep. Yep, no worries.
Just since the point came up, I'll be showing this a little bit later, but all of the we run all of the maintenance requests, et cetera, for StraboSpot through GitHub. And so there'll be a GitHub issue created for our developers to add the plunges to the lineations soon. I'll show a little bit of that at the very end of today's session, just what we do and kind of a little bit behind the scenes on how development works. But if you wanted to grab the code for this and look at it, see how we're doing things, you could easily do that and bring it in and look at whatever you wanted to with it. Nick, I'm also going to load up on mine the FC24 project because it has a lot of nice tag stuff in it too.
Yeah, yeah. Sounds good.
So Steve, you asked, select a measurement label, closes the program. Yeah, the GitHub that I'll be showing later will do that. You can also report bugs to StraboSpot. Believe that is in the About StraboSpot, isn't it? Do you remember, Nick?
Your GitHub link.
Let's see where that reporting is. We should put the reporting back into the StraboSpot about Strabo2, because you can email StraboSpot and with issues. Trying to remember where that is.
Oh, did that get taken out?
Yeah, it must
Oh,
not have
yeah,
gotten
it did.
put into help. Can you go ahead and put that back into help when you get a chance?
Yeah. 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 So, okay. So I see what the, yeah. So the measurement information, those eyes, that's a known, we need to basically either take them out or populate them with something. They're a dead end right now. The little information icon.
Oh,
Next to several
okay,
things.
that's it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Those should go away for right now.
Nick, I want to commend you and your team. I am very, very impressed with the format, the layout, and the ease of moving from screen to screen. I'd give you an attaboy, but that's what I would do. So anyway, you did an excellent job. Have a nice morning. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
So the 2018 AGU meeting, basically Nick got up and said, I used Strava last summer and I've got some really good ideas for it. And that's how Nick became the Strabo2 designer.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Okay, Scott is asking if you have drawn two contacts, then close a unit. Is there a way to make the polygon match those contacts exactly? The answer is no. So to do that, we would need to basically do a whole topology module, and we've decided that kind of our conception of mapping in StraboSpot is that it's the first draft. So you can export these the polygons as shape files and do kind of more detailed polygon matching and all that stuff in a true GIS environment. Doug, does that sound about
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And let me just share my screen real quick now here. If it'll go to my iPad, which it will. Yeah, so what with the tag colors, for example, this is a very small map area, but the tag colors now are showing the geologic units. So this isn't very complicated geology. you don't get too confused by unit boundaries between different things. So that's how you can visualize now. And if you go to a bigger scale of mapping, again, you can follow units based on color.
And just to Kurt's question, yeah, there's the little information buttons often will cause the app to crash because we basically forgot about them, and they are dead ends in the app. So that is going to be a bug that's easy to fix. We'll just take those buttons out basically. And then, yes, Liz, is there a way to edit lines and polygons while drawing? So it's not while drawing, but I will just quickly share my screen and show you how that works. Okay, so here's my screen. If I put a line and I just drop, I'm going to choose the line drawing tool that just where you drop vertices by tapping the screen. So I can't edit these lines while I'm drawing, but if I hit end draw and then I hold, so you can't see my taps, but I basically pressed and held on the line itself on the map. If I press and hold that, then what comes up are all the vertices, and you can move those around.
Okay, cool, thanks.
So yeah, and this is why we still have because normally you'd think, well, isn't freehand drawing just better for lines rather than the tap?
No.
But the answer is basically no for a lot of the case, because if I go to a freehand and I draw a similar line, and I say end draw, but then I press and hold, what you see is it's like 200 vertices. So it's harder. You basically have to erase that line and redraw it if you want to edit it, because it's just too time consuming to edit all those vertices.
That's good to know, thanks. Were you going to go over lines and polygons at some point later? Maybe that was jumping the gun here.
They will come up, but no, essentially no. It's good that you're asking these questions.
Okay, thanks. Because I didn't use Strabo 1 that much, so I'm totally a beginner. So.
Yeah, and I think you're maybe the more common user, I think. So that's all good.
One more question, sorry to be a pain. Are you going to talk about getting map bases, importing maps into the app?
Yes, that I will talk about that.
Okay, awesome.
Specifically, yeah.
Because
We'll
that was
also have a little discussion on how to work with drone imagery if you're doing that. And you can actually use StraboSpot with a server completely remotely. And we'll talk a little bit about that later in the week.
Cool, thanks.
But since you asked about lines, on lines, if I go and tap this spot and open it up in the notebook, an interesting thing about lines and polygons is you can kind of say what that line represents. So a line can be a trace feature, and then you can specify what it is. So you can say it's a contact, a geologic structure, a geomorphic feature, and so on. And so that helps. Like if you're mapping and you say it's a contact, then these lines will how they appear on the map will change slightly from type to type.
Nick, can you also show for a point spot how to relocate?
Sure. Yeah. So I put a point there, and I'll just tap. So now I will add a point at my current location. Here, I'll just There we go. Okay, so I have a point spot there, but let's say I want to move it a little bit. I just press and hold on that spot on the map. And now I can drag it and move it to a new location. This is really useful. I just used this in the field. I was in more of a canyon and the GPS just isn't that reliable. So I ended up using a map. I would put out my location and then use a map to move it to exactly where I was.
So Nick, suppose you have that spot there, but your GPS is good. How do you relocate to your current location?
Sure. So this is not my current location. So I can tap up here on the GPS location that's highlighted in blue. If I tap on that, it gives me information about exactly where I am and the geometry. And I can just hit this locate button on the right of longitude and latitude. If I do that, it will, you saw the longitude and latitude update. If I hit save, then that's my current location. So you can always shift a point to your current location if you think it's not where it is.
Then if you go ahead and click on that again, the latitude, longitude.
Oh, yep.
So what it's done now is it's captured GPS accuracy and altitude as well. So if you want to enter the altitude, you can do that by hand, or you can see what it pulls in from the GPS as well. Okay, we got about another minute before we're gonna put Alex on, I believe. All right before we begin, I just wanted to say one more quick thing is that these sessions are being recorded and they will be available at the YouTube channel for StraboSpot. So if you want to go back and check anything out later on, you can do it. Or if you know someone else who's wanting to use Strabo2, you can tell them, hey, go to YouTube and you can get the intro. All right, now we're going to hear from Alex on moving projects around. Strabo 1, Strabo 2.
Can everybody see my screen and hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, cool. So it's super easy, only going to take a couple minutes here. And I'm going to give an example using a project I have in Northwest Argentina, and we're going to see some nice folds and some Permian red beds. So Strabo 1 and Strabo 2 communicate most easily by uploading your projects to the server. And that can either be kind of in the cloud or on a local server. And then you can also go backwards as well from Strabo 2 to Strabo 1. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take our project in Strabo 1, make sure that it's saved, upload it to the server, and then in Strabo 2, we'll download the project from the server. Pretty straightforward. So here's Strabo 1, the interface in Strabo 1 that may look familiar to many of you. Here's some of these nice folds in Permian red beds. I have a project here with a couple faults and a couple bedding attitudes. So what I want to do is upload this project to the server. To do that, I'll click project. And now at this point, I can choose which data sets I want to upload. And like Nick mentioned earlier, this is going to be important if you're working with multiple people. Maybe you have a data set assigned to each person. So I want to upload both data sets, and then I'll click on this little three dot bar up here. And I have a couple different options with managing a project here. I can create a project, switch projects, or I can either upload or download a project from the cloud or do it locally. So the easiest way to transfer from Strabo 1 to Strabo 2 is going to be to upload it. So I'll click that. And this is important. This is just a warning that says, okay, well, any data sets that I'm uploading right now are going to overwrite whatever file is currently stored. So this is something you'll want to watch out for, especially if you're working in a group. I'm going to say, okay. And depending on how big your project or your data sets are, it may take a minute or two. And that's that. So that's as easy as that in Strabo 1. So now we would switch to Strabo 2. And we have a different interface that Nick has showed us a little bit, and we'll go into more details later. But to download a project in Strabo 2, we'll click on our home icon. And the first option up here is managing projects. So we can either go to our My StraboSpot. We currently have an active project, which is from a workshop from last year, or we have options to upload, backup, or export projects from Strabo 2. So we're going to click My StraboSpot. And here I can either start a new project or load a project from the server. And we just uploaded a project to the server, so I'll click on that. And it will give me a list populated with all of my projects that are currently on the server. The one that I want to use here is Strabo 2 workshop. And again, it's going to warn us, okay, well, the project that we currently have on our device is going to be overwritten. So do we want to back up that project or do we just want to overwrite it? And currently, I'm just going to choose to overwrite it. And again, depending on your connection and how big that is, it'll take a minute or two. And you'll notice here that it says everything is finished downloading except for images. Images here just finished gathering the needed images. So the next thing we need to do is just to download our actual images that were associated with those projects or that project in those data sets. So here's our two data sets that we have, and currently neither of these are displayed. So I'm still in Madison instead of in Argentina. And I have this option here, shows a little image of a photo, and I have the option to download those. Okay, so I'm going to turn on these data sets, and that's going to bring me to where my project is. And then I would click the download photos here, and it would take a minute to download whatever images. And once they're downloaded, you'll see a little checkbox, and that's it. Then you can go and here, for example, right, looks a little different just because I changed the map, but I can go to Mapbox Satellite, and there's my whole project now in Strabo 2. And I could do the same process working backwards, but otherwise it's fairly straightforward. So any questions related to that? We will be, like Basil mentioned, having a help desk this afternoon. So if you have questions setting up Strabo 2, transferring projects, anything like that, feel free to drop into that. And I will send out an email when this session 1 concludes with a Zoom link for that.
Alex, can I add just a couple things about the Strabo 1, Strabo 2 connection? So right now, and our plan is to always keep Strabo 1 and Strabo 2 compatible with each other as much as we can. So that if you, for example, are working on a Strabo 1 project that you have sedimentology, a lot of stratigraphy data in and measured strat sections, you can still bring that into Strabo 2 and work on the map part of it and samples, et cetera. You just won't be able to access the stratigraphic tools right now. Eventually you'll be able to, but right now you wouldn't be able to do that. And then just a quick note, part of this last summer when we were doing the first field testing of Strabo 1 and Strabo 2 with a bunch of students, the display properties for lines, points, polygons, and that wasn't really very far along in Strabo 2. So we actually just had the students kind of go back and forth all the time between 1 and 2 to be able to visualize faults and other structures better. So it's been tested quite a bit. Any questions on any of the Strabo 1, Strabo 2 connections? We're hoping, of course, that everybody just migrates over to Strabo 2, and we'll talk about the timing of some of the feature migration in just a little bit. Okay, well, Nick, are you ready to go again on saving and backing up, etc.?
Yes. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about for 10 or 15 minutes is how to save, import, and export your data. And just a note about the way in general that saving and backing up goes. So before you save or back up, you want to turn on all the data sets that you want to actually do the saving or backing up. And that's because the way that the app interacts with the server is that it will only transfer data sets that are currently toggled on. So that's the green over here on these little slider toggles. That's useful in some situations if you actually don't want to be overwriting or updating data sets on the server. You just want to update a specific data set. So that's why we do that. But it's just important to remember, if you've turned off a bunch of data sets because you just don't want to see them, you should turn those back on if you want them to be backed up. So to turn those on, just to review, you go over in the settings and preferences, you go to your active project, and then you can toggle those on and off here. Okay, so saving and backing up is all done in this window, the upload, backup, and export. And so if you were to click on that, you are brought up to this screen, and there are basically two ways to save your project. And one is for only when you're internet connected. So if you have an internet connection, you can and should back it up to the StraboSpot server. When you are offline, your option is to back it up to your iPad's file system. And once it's in the file system, you can actually then share it, like airdrop it to another device, or do whatever you want in terms of the iPad's capability outside of Strabo. And I'll demo these things after this brief introduction. So for importing a project, as Alex just said, you go to My StraboSpot under Manage. And again, you have two ways to import a project. When you're internet connected, you can load a project from your account on the StraboSpot server. And when you're offline, if you have backed up a project before, then it will give you the option to load the project from your device. So many of you, if you haven't backed up, when you go to this screen on your own iPad, you won't see this option, load a project from a device, because that only appears once you've actually created a backup. And then finally, exporting formatted data out of Strabo. This is something that you do on the web interface at StraboSpot.org under your account. So you go to StraboSpot.org, the account tab, My Data, and each project will look something like this. And one of the columns says download, and if you click select, you'll have the opportunity to download your data as a shapefile, a KMZ, an Excel file. StaryNet Mobile is a text file, and it only pulls the measurements and the notes that go along with the measurements. You can export it as a kind of PDF field book, and you can export this is more for Strabo1 for the strat. If you've built strat columns, you can export just those, and you can also download all of the photos stored within your project. So those are the current options. None of them have customizability. So the shapefile, it's basically, we chose what data gets included there. But we are, over the summer and the fall, we're working on more customization options so that you can get the data how you want it out of the StraboSpot project. Okay, so I'm going to do a very quick demo, just showing how to do the backing up to device, because that's the thing that you haven't seen. So I'll stop sharing here, and I'll share my iPad. Great. So to create a backup, I go up to the upper left-hand corner and go to Upload, Backup, and Export, and I click Backup Project to Device. And it will pop up with a little modal that allows me to, at the very bottom, to name that backup. By default, it names it the date and time that you're backing it up, underscore, and then the project name. And it tells you which data sets are going to be backed up. And all three of my data sets are on, so it'll back up all of them. So I hit backup. Now it backs up the images. It also backs up any map tiles, downloaded map tiles that I've downloaded offline. And of course, all of the spots and data. So I can click OK. And now I can actually, in order to see that backup, I can click at the bottom, View/Edit Files on Device. And it brings me to the location in the Apple file system where the backup exists. So you can see I have two backups of this project. If I go back, you can actually see where it is on the iPad that this data gets stored. So on the left, it's on my iPad, and then in the StraboSpot2 app, and then project backups. And if I click in there, it has some data files, some .json files, and it has all the images. So once you're here, you can, for example, I can copy that and put it somewhere else on my iPad. I can share it, and so I could airdrop it to another iPad or a phone just for data storage. And so there are several things that you can do with this data to kind of make as secure a backup as you possibly can in the field. I think are there any questions? I'm happy to show things that people want to see.
So Nick, if you had an external memory stick, you could, a lightning stick or a USB-C stick, you could plug that in and copy it off to that as well.
Yep. So what I've done in the field is I have a SD card and a little dongle that connects the SD card to the iPad. I can just drag that folder onto the SD card as a kind of a backup that is totally separate from my iPad in case something were to happen to it. Yep.
So I think at this point, with one of our worries with iOS was that it was difficult to make these external backups. That trouble is gone, and you can do it with with Strabo2. So at this point, if you're used to Xeroxing your field maps and field books and mailing it to somebody or mailing it to yourself, you can now just go in here, copy it off to a memory stick, and then send that to somebody or to yourself as well. So
Yeah.
Colleen says, I'm crashing when I tap back up to device.
Yes, so this is, we've run into this issue in a specific circumstance, which is if you downloaded the app from the App Store after having the beta without deleting the beta first. So if, I don't know if that's your case. If that is, then it's a known problem. Otherwise, it's a bug that we definitely need to address. So I don't know, Colleen, if that's your case. If you run into that, just delete the app entirely. It does delete all the data associated with the app, but and then download it from the App Store.
So if you tried to
would
delete
be
it,
how you,
it should have said uninstall at that point. Sorry, go ahead.
or it should say, it sounds like you did the right thing. So yeah, that is definitely an issue that we need to address. Yeah, you could, so try reinstalling it. And the other thing is, do you know that you have data sets turned on? Because that could be another thing that I could foresee. Maybe we haven't thought about that issue yet.
I'll just I'll just throw in a couple more quick things on the backup and uploading to the server. So whenever you're uploading to server, it actually creates a version of the software of your project, and it doesn't actually overwrite what you've done in the past. It just puts a new version up as the active version. So if you do an upload, or you find that you made a bunch of mistakes, or somehow you destroyed something with your project, you can reclaim a previous version, and all those previous versions are all listed in there. And there is no limit at this point to how many old versions you can keep. We haven't had any storage problems at all with that. See, some maps show a scale bar and others do not. So at this point, the scale bars, if they appear from a uploaded map, they'll be there. We do not have the twin of the Strabo 1 scale bar in meters or kilometers yet. Part of that is trying to find the right package to put a scale bar in. We have beta tested a couple different versions that basically did not perform well at all. So we're just about to write our own package for a scale bar. The React native system, nobody's written a scale bar for the mapping part yet that's really nice and performant.
Yeah, so just to directly answer the question, the reason some of the maps on the demos today have had scale bars is because they were screenshots from the beta. And one during the beta, we were testing out different types of scale bars. So that's why. So we've removed that because of performance issues, but it will be coming back when we write our own. It's a clear feature that you definitely need.
Any other questions on upload, backup, and export? It's really, really good to do. It's you can now keep your maps as safe as you possibly can. Very nice. Okay. All right, well, the last, if there's no more questions on this, we have a little bit more brief introduction on what's under construction and when it'll be available. And I'm gonna show a little bit of screen share for some web pages as well, just to make sure everybody's on the same page and can see these sorts of things and see a little bit about how Strabo design work happens behind the scenes. So right now we have a basic functionality for field data collection with Strabo2. So if you're used to using Strabo1 for field data collection, it should be pretty much the same as in Strabo1. You can enter rock units. There's some rock type information you can enter. You can put tags together for rock descriptions, but there's just a lot more functionality. The notes are much more expansive at this point, and the drawing and sketching is more advanced at this point as well. We'll get demos of some of those things as the days go on, and I may show a demo or two here. But anyway, so the big modules that are missing at this point and are in development for Strabo2 are the igneous and metamorphic petrology packages, the Strabo SED package, and the fabrics package. Fabrics and igneous and metamorphic petrology will be in, we're planning on having those as updates in the next month. The Strabo SED part is taking a little bit longer to get going because that's a completely separate drawing mode for the StraboSpot system. So what we're doing with that is going through a complete redesign of how you add data, how you add the interval data, and how you draw stratigraphic profiles. And we're thinking the new developments in that should make it a lot more user-friendly for people drawing strat sections. So I am hoping that we have the strat section implemented by GSA time this fall. Sometime this fall, we should be able to have that going. That's the next big, that and the Android support, whatever we can do for that will be the next big challenges that we have once petrology and fabrics are in. So that's where we're heading with those things. And that's really what we're lagging behind on. Julie Newman, presented all the Strabo Micro and Strabo experimental. We'll get more on that later on in the week. Like we said there, the Micro is functioning fine as an image cataloging system, and soon over the summer we'll get updated versions with better metadata and things like that going on with the Strabo Micro. So we're testing that now. I just wanted to show a couple things about how we work on things sort of behind the scenes. So let me show a screen here. Is everybody seeing what looks like GitHub?
Yes.
All right. So we have, and you can go, if you have a GitHub account, you can go to StraboSpot and put up your own issues on GitHub for Strabo Mobile, which is what we have here. And this is for our new igneous and metamorphic work that we're doing. And this is kind of the workflow. We start through raising an issue up in here, and then we have a few comments on it, and then Nick does his magic of putting together mock-ups for what the screen should look like. So we're back in Madison again. And so these mock-ups will get put in. We start to develop all of these different things and how they should work. The workflow of this has to be completely worked out ahead of time for the developers. And so all of the features that you see here, including all of the icons here, there has to be, I don't know, 50 different versions of these that we store for using at different times and in different circumstances. So we'll do a mock-up set of development with this. And then as far as we're working, we'll make comments back and forth to each other all the time with these sorts of things as we implement them. So that gives you, I hope, a little bit of feel for how we're working behind the scenes with trying to get these new features out. The other thing that we use in our development work, just so you get a feel for that, is something that something that's called Kobo Tool Box. And let me find that here. Oh, where is it? I'm sorry, I'm having, actually, if I go to here, does this switch to the Kobo Toolbox screen? Okay, great. So basically the way we do a lot of the development of the forms that you see in the vocabulary is through this thing called Kobo Tool Box. And what that does is it puts together projects that consist of all kinds of different data sheets. And for example, if we're looking at the igneous plutonic rock sheet, you can pull that up, you get a bit of the history. We can edit it and go in. We actually can add and delete different characteristics from these sort of things. But the other thing that it allows us to do is it allows us to test and preview the form. So for example, this would be our preview of, say, adding a granite sample pluton and then how we add different features to it. So we're able to select, for example, a select one option, or if we want to enter a whole bunch of different textures, we can do that. Things like color index can be entered, modification, and of course notes can be entered in as well. So this is kind of in our development cycle that you'll see, well, you won't see, that goes on behind the scenes. And those forms can actually be exported to Excel and be edited in those if you are familiar with XLS forms. And there's a lot of other options for bringing the data in. Those forms that you see right there go straight to our developers as conceived and put together by the geologists, and then they're implemented through those methods. So that brings a lot of this, I hope, kind of the back end development to light. On Thursday, we'll have the developers on and they can give you a quick summary of how that sort of development goes on their part, how they're doing their work as well. So we just wanted to basically demo that to you guys so that you could see what's actually happening behind the scenes. We're coming towards the end. Do any of the other Strabo team have anything they want to comment on or bring up or show at this point? Nick says no. Julie, Basil, Alex, or Noah? Alex?
Nope, nothing for me.
Oh, okay.
I would just reiterate that there's a help desk. So if there's any problems at all, getting the app down, putting spots on, that would be a great time because it'll allow you to sort of participate more fully in the upcoming days.
So we've got more planned for the upcoming days. Today was our basic intro. Tomorrow, we're going to go through a lot of the Strabo tool basics, like setting up a project and working with online, offline maps and getting custom maps in, and a lot more detail on symbology and navigating notebooks and that. So tomorrow will be a lot of the sort of nitty gritty stuff to do. So you should definitely get a copy of Strabo2 on your device if you can soon, so you can partake in that more. One of the things too we'll be doing on the last day of this is we've got some time set up aside in the morning that if you want to show some of your Strabo projects, either in Strabo 1 or Strabo 2, we've got some time for you to do that. One of the things, again, we'll be demoing in the next day or so, sorry, on Thursday, is more interactions with StereoNet Mobile. And I know some people have collected hundreds or thousands of data points in StereoNet Mobile, and we'll show you how you can just simply bring those in and visualize them in StraboSpot.
So
Hazel.
we did a lot of these last summer, these workshops, and our experience with that is the people who got the most out of them were the people who did a project during the week that we did this, even if it's a small project, sort of 5 data points, just to be able to play around. So I would highly encourage people to do that. The second issue is that Randy asked the $1 million question here, which is what happens to Strabo when you folks retire and move on to other projects. So I'll take the first shot at that, and then I'll let Doug or Julie or anyone else say anything they want afterwards. We are working to make Strabo a community resource. So the idea was that for its future, it will live on in some type of data management center so that the data is around so that people can use it. So the idea is that your data will be used, can even be used by future generations if, you know, dams go in, areas become inaccessible, that sort of thing. The idea is to set up a community-based leadership group that decides on sort of what needs to be implemented for that. And so those are sort of that's our broad, sort of a short version of our broad vision for that. So we turn it into more of a community resource that maybe the leadership group is at GSA to do, with some sort of director who takes a more direct role with the programmers to keep it updated. So this was based on an NSF initiative, and they are highly motivated to keep it going. So there will be a future to it, and we're planning for that as we step aside. Right now, we still need to be a little bit more flexible at doing things as we're trying to incorporate other communities, such as tephrochronology or geomorphology, into the StraboSpot system. Those are sort of the near-term plans. Doug, did you want to say anything more about that?
The only other thing I wanted to say is that when Nick was showing you the file backup, you could see that you could go through your pictures in there. That's all your pictures are saved as images. You can pull those out. He also showed that there were a couple of text files associated with it that had a JSON extension with them. And those are completely human machine readable files. So one of the other things that we're doing is that even if everything went away and the systems went away, the basic data will be captured there. And the JSON format, I'll try to demo this maybe tomorrow. The JSON format is one that essentially every programmer knows how to deal with. So you can actually upload your JSON files into GitHub. GitHub is going to be around for a long time. And in GitHub, you can visualize them and look at your data. So the format that we're choosing to use here for transferring data is one that should be very, very robust into the future. It's an ASCII-based, text-based format, which should be able to survive for a long, long time.
I'll add one more thing onto that.
Yeah.
which is, so that is talking about like the future of the Strabo data system in terms of the back end. In terms of the app, right, we have the resources and plan to continue developing and updating the app, but the app is just the way to get into the data system, and it's a really nice tool for collecting data. But we have a public facing REST API that any programmer making an app can access and have, using login credentials, upload data into this system. So Rick Almendinger's staring at mobile, you can log into Strabo and upload your data into Strabo. So he actually has already, that's an example of an app that's already used this public API. So we kind of envision that the Strabo app is the one-stop shop, right? This is an app that is useful for many types of workflows for you to go in. But in the future, there could be, depending on who in the community wants to make them, apps that are more specialized for a certain type of workflow that still use the Strabo data structure and upload to Strabo.